We got Charlie Gasparino here, the Wall Street Journal's Dan Henninger, and the Center for Freedom and Prosperity's Dan Mitchell. First, Charlie, with some pressure the president's getting on this trade.
Yeah, some interesting headlines here. Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan and the Business Roundtable have been battling with Trump over these tariff issues. They hate it. It's very interesting because a lot of this stuff is done because of relationships. Jamie Dimon had a very close relationship in the beginning of the Trump administration up until about February, I would say. What we understand is that relationship has cooled primarily over trade. They haven't spoken since February. There's essentially a quarrel between the top business leaders in this country, represented by Dimon, the Business Roundtable, and President Trump over this tariff business. Now, the president may walk away from it and not do these tariffs. It may be, carrying a big stick and not going through with it. But I can tell you right now, Jamie Dimon and President Trump have not spoken since February. One of the reasons why is because their relationship has cooled over this trade issue. And he's essentially alienating, I would say, a pretty important block here for Republicans going forward. If you want campaign contributions, this is where the money is. And it's over trade.
Well, you can argue that he's one of the help to complain with a big old tax cut that has made him $1 gazillion. But having said that, absolutely. But where is this going, the whole trade thing? The threat is supposed to, Dan, produce the results. You don't need to actually have them.
Well, exactly right, Neil. I mean, this is the biggest test ever of Trump's negotiating model, the art of the deal. I mean, he threw down the gauntlet on Iran, withdrew from the Iran deal. He's going to Singapore to negotiate with Kim Jong-un. I think this is many, many times bigger. Essentially, Donald Trump is taking on the whole wide world. Every country that's a trading partner, hundreds of countries, tens upon tens of thousands of companies, millions of workers, which is to say the global economy, very complicated supply chains, prices being determined all day long. And he has decided to push against that system by imposing these tariffs. Not threatening. They imposed them last week. They're imposing them on Europe and on the Canadians and the Mexicans. So what happens after that is going to be a good question, because they are now threatening to retaliate, specifically targeting states in the United States that supported Donald Trump. Wisconsin cranberry growers, Washington apple growers, farmers across the Midwest and in California, where, incidentally, the Republicans held their own in the primaries Tuesday.
Dan Mitchell, one of the things that's been raised here is the president, as I raised with the other Dan here, that he doesn't think it will come to that, and that people will come to their senses. But we do know from trade tips that they get nasty. What's your sense?
We saw that in the 1930s, and that's what I'm scared of now. If Trump follows through with all these tariffs and then we get retaliation from these other countries, with Trump's personality, he's likely to then double down and do something even worse. And keep in mind, these are not tariffs we're imposing on the Japanese or the Europeans. These are taxes being imposed upon American consumers. And I don't really care whether the Republican Party and the business community have good relations. I care about the danger to the global economy, but specifically the American economy, of some sort of tit-for-tat 1930s replay of global protectionism.
Well, that's what the business community is worried about. Right. I mean, let's be real clear here. I mean, Jamie Dimon just doesn't spout off and doesn't just diss the president because he's got up in the wrong side of the bed today. I mean, he's worried about a tit-for-tat trade war. He's worried about not just, tweaking NAFTA and fixing it, because it should be modernized and, brought up to date. It's old, right? He's worried about throwing it totally out and getting rid of all the good parts. And, and I hate to say it, you do need somewhat of a relationship with the business community. It always helps. They employ a lot of people. And to go to war with them is downright
stupid. You know what's
stupid.
weird? It's a legitimate concern you've all raised, and yet the markets race ahead, even today, on all of this. And I'm wondering, Dan Henninger, when you see that, is it that they don't think anything will come of it, or that the underlying economy, jobs report, all the other stuff is so good, no need to worry about this?
Well, I think the market is just thrilled with the underlying economy.
Right.
I mean, they finally got a strong economy. They're reacting to that. They do not want to let it go. They don't want to believe that these tariffs are going to happen. And if we did get into a trade war and the economy began to pull back a little bit, certain sectors of the economy, the market pull back, that could have an effect on the November elections, because the Republicans have an unbelievably strong economy to run on. It's just very difficult to find an economy that is like the wind at your back. And if that wind dies down, the entire Republican Party, which Donald Trump has been campaigning very hard for in these rallies around the country, could be in trouble.
Well, the markets react based on, stocks go up based on corporate earnings, right? Let's distill it here. And this will come to a test. Is Wilbur Ross right when he says, shows a can and says this is just pennies, it doesn't have that much of an impact? Or is Dan Henninger and me, right, and Charlie Gasparino right, that you get into a trade war and you start doing this, they start doing that, that's going to impact business.
But that takes time. And Dan Mitchell, that's the thing, cynically, I think that they think, even if it comes to that, comes to blows, comes to tariffs, that the impact could be many months, and that people won't appreciate that by Election Day. It's a very cynical view. What do you think of that?
I guess there's two things. One is what's actually going to happen in terms of higher input prices for businesses, higher consumer prices for those of us going to the cash register, and that might take several months. Right. However, when you're looking at the stock market as sort of a predictor of future economic performance, if all of a sudden investors suddenly think, wait, this protectionism stuff, this is serious, you could see some sort of a short-run disruption that could actually then wind up affecting November, because all of a sudden people could get pessimistic.
Yeah, I think all of this is a lot of subterfuge to their point that they don't see it happening. They just don't, markets, I'm talking to the markets, don't see it coming to a trade war.
You know, Neil, I think there's another big foreign policy issue here that's involved, and that is two of the other major initiatives that I mentioned that Donald Trump's got going. Withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. That was huge, and now he's going to negotiate Kim Jong-un's nuclear capability. To do both, he needs the Europeans on Iran, right? He needs the Germans, he needs the Brits, and he needs the French. He does not need to be involved in a trade dispute with them while he's asking for their support on Iran. Over in Asia, he needs the Japanese, and God knows the South Koreans to support him. So he's putting this wedge between his trade policy and his foreign policy.
But he doesn't care. He doesn't seem to care.
Well,
he may find out he has to care.
Well, if the markets start cratering and if corporate profits go down. By the way, I think it takes the time span between policy and how it affects corporate profits now is a lot thinner. I mean it happens pretty fast these days, just the way the global economy is structured. So if they really start engaging in a trade war, if they target us, I think you're going to feel it pretty immediately, where it will have a bottom line impact on businesses.
Have a bottom line impact on individuals going to the store, purchasing stuff. That will be immediate?
I think it's sooner. In the old days, it may take 6 months. Now it takes 3. And by the way,
do you agree with that?
Yeah, or let's mention farmers. I mean, farmers have been having kind of a tough time. If interest rates go up, you could see farmers heading towards a recession.
Well, they get it immediately because it's all traded in commodities markets, which react immediately.